The truth was never buried. It was hidden in plain sight, stitched into the floorboards and shadows of Willow Creek. Elena Lexington had inherited more than an estate. She had inherited a lie built over generations, and now that she had begun to peel back its layers, something or someone wanted to make sure she never uncovered the rest. The air inside the Lexington law office was stale, tinged with the scent of old paper, leather, and unease. Elena Lexington sat straight-backed in the leather armchair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a navy dress, subtle and sharp, the kind her father always approved of, structured, elegant, restrained. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a storm brewing beneath the calm surface. Around her sat the people she had grown up with, or tolerated. Across from her, Morgan Lexington, her half-sister, lounged as if she owned the room, one leg crossed over the other, exuding a confidence that always came off more like entitlement. Beside Morgan, their brother Charles adjusted his cufflinks, eyes darting around the room, avoiding Elena's gaze. Their father, Richard Lexington, had died 10 days ago. Now they sat in the cold formality of the Lexington and Price boardroom, walls lined with shelves of ancient legal tomes that no one had touched in decades. At the head of the table, Robert Kessler, the family attorney and Richard's longtime confidant, cleared his throat. "I'd like to thank you all for coming," he began, his voice a practiced monotone. "We're here to execute the last will of Richard A. Lexington, as per his final instructions." Elena barely heard the opening formalities. Her mind replayed her final conversation with her father, brief, brittle, and hollow. He had been weak in his hospital bed, a shadow of the titan who once ruled Lexington Enterprises. He had asked about the quarterly report, not about her well-being. Robert continued, "Richard Lexington's estate, totaling approximately $1.2 billion, is to be divided among his surviving children and selected beneficiaries." Elena blinked. She had expected this. She had also expected something more, something meaningful. Robert read on. "To Charles Lexington, I leave 20% of my estate, including shares in Lexington Manufacturing and the New York penthouse." Charles's expression flickered. Relief, satisfaction, calculation. "To Morgan Lexington," Robert went on, "I leave 20% of my estate, the Miami property, and controlling shares in Lexington Lifestyle Brands." Morgan smirked. Elena inhaled. "And to Elena Grace Lexington." Robert paused. The pause was too long. Elena's chest tightened. "I leave my journals, personal effects, and the property known as Willow Creek Estate in Vermont. Elena will also retain her current shares in Lexington Enterprises, 10%. Silence. Charles shifted in his seat. Morgan's smirk widened into a smirk of disbelief. Elena stared at Robert. "That's it?" she asked, her voice even. Robert's eyes flickered. "Yes, that is the extent of your inheritance." Elena leaned forward. "I was the one running the company for the last 6 years. I stabilized the stock after the tech scandal. I handled the expansion in Europe. What justification, reasoning, could he have had for this insult?" Morgan chuckled. "Maybe he finally saw through you. Always the perfect little soldier playing CEO." Charles added, "Let's not turn this into drama, Elena. You were well compensated." Robert interrupted. "There is one final clause." All eyes turned to him. "If Elena Lexington chooses to challenge the will, all of her shares in Lexington Enterprises shall be forfeited and redistributed equally between Morgan and Charles." The room dropped into silence again. A bomb had been dropped. Elena's face remained neutral, but her fingers twitched slightly against the polished wood of the table. "So he wanted to shut me up even after death," she whispered. Robert offered a thin smile. "Those were Mr. Lexington's wishes." Morgan leaned back, triumphant. "Well, sister, looks like Dad finally picked his favorites." Elena stood slowly. She smoothed her dress, nodded curtly, and walked toward the door. "Elena," Robert said, "he did leave you a letter, handwritten, said you should read it alone." She took the envelope without a word. As she exited the room, the sound of muffled laughter followed her. She didn't flinch. In the hallway, she ripped open the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elena, if you are reading this, I am dead. I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But there are things you don't understand. Truths buried deep beneath our legacy. Willow Creek holds the first key. Look beyond the title and the timber. I am sorry for what you are about to uncover. Your father, Richard. Elena folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Her expression was no longer one of grief or shock. It was resolved. 3 days later, the sky above Vermont hung low and colorless, the clouds bruised with stormlight. Elena's car crunched slowly up the gravel driveway of Willow Creek Estate. The house emerged from the fog like something forgotten, an ivy-choked Victorian with shuttered windows and gables like scowling eyebrows. The estate had always unsettled her. She'd only been here once when she was 13. Her father had said nothing on the drive, only that it was important she see it. They had walked the grounds in silence. The memory lingered like smoke. She stepped out, heels sinking into damp gravel. The air smelled of wet earth and rotting leaves. As she approached the porch, a crow shrieked from a nearby tree and took flight. She paused. The place didn't feel abandoned, it felt watchful. The front door creaked open under her hand, resisting slightly, like something reluctant to be disturbed. The inside swallowed her in shadow. No electricity. Cold. The air was stagnant and heavy, with the sour scent of mildew and old wood. Dust sheets cloaked the furniture like shrouds. Her footsteps echoed eerily against the high ceilings. She turned on a flashlight and made her way to the library. The fireplace was just as she remembered. She knelt, fingers tracing along the rough stones until one shifted. Behind it, a small brass key, exactly where the letter had implied. The cabinet creaked as she opened it. Inside, a stack of black-bound journals, spines labeled only with years. The earliest, 1976. She lit a fire to push back the gloom and sat at the massive oak desk, the journals before her like buried coffins waiting to be unearthed. The first entry, October 13th, 1976. The Lexington legacy began with blood. No one knows this. My father paid handsomely to keep it buried, but if the truth surfaces, it will destroy everything. A chill crept over her despite the fire. She kept reading. The entries peeled back a history she hadn't imagined. Back room. Deals, forged partnerships, names crossed out with finality. Power was never inherited, Richard had written. It was taken piece by piece, lie by lie. By the fourth journal, the entries became darker. Names, known politicians, corporate rivals, board members emerged like stains. Robert Kessler's name appeared, circled. Underneath, insurance, leverage, risk. The wind outside howled. Floorboards groaned above her. She froze. Just the house settling. She turned another page. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message. Be careful what you dig up, Elena. Some root strangle. She stared at it. No signal bars. No Wi-Fi. The fire hissed behind her. The room felt suddenly smaller. She stood slowly and scanned the darkened corners of the library. Her breath fogged. In the cold air. She wasn't alone. Elena didn't sleep that night. She remained in the library, wrapped in a wool blanket she'd found draped across a wingback chair, the journals stacked like unearthed tombstones around her. Outside, the wind battered the ancient trees. The house groaned and creaked like an old creature whispering in its sleep. She kept her father's letter in her lap, reading and rereading the final words. Look beyond the title and the timber. It had to mean something. In the faint glow of dawn, she explored. The second floor was a labyrinth of locked doors and boarded-up windows. Dust lay thick across the floor, disturbed only by her footprints and, she noticed with a growing sense of unease, others that were not hers. A trail of faint, muddy prints led from the central hallway to one of the guest rooms. She opened the door slowly. It groaned open on rusted hinges. Inside, nothing but an antique bed frame, a cracked mirror, and a cold fireplace. And then she saw it, scratches on the floorboards, as if something heavy had been dragged recently. She knelt, running her hand over the wood. The boards were loose. She pried one up, beneath it, a narrow box wrapped in oilcloth. She opened it. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Old, faded, but unmistakable. Her father, Robert Kessler. A man she didn't recognize. Eyes blacked out with a thick marker. And documents. Offshore accounts. Letters. A birth certificate. Not hers. Someone named Judith Catherine Langston. Her hands trembled. Judith Langston was her grandmother's maiden name, or so she'd been told. A new notification buzzed on her phone. No number, no service. Stop. Now. Or you won't leave Willow Creek. Elena backed away from the bed, her breath catching in her throat. Outside, the storm had returned. But inside Willow Creek, it was just beginning. The message on her phone lingered like frostbite. Cold, inexplicable, and far too precise. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears as she scanned the room, phone gripped, tightly in one hand, the other still clutching the documents from the hidden box. She stepped back, her heel catching on the warped floorboard. A creak echoed down the hallway beyond, followed by another. Soft, deliberate. Footsteps. She extinguished her flashlight and flattened herself against the wall. The sound grew louder, closer, then stopped just outside the doorway. A shadow loomed. Elena's breath hitched. Whoever was there didn't knock, didn't speak, just stood. She dared a glance toward the crack between door and frame. Empty. A trap? Suddenly the floor groaned behind her. She spun. Nothing. Heart pounding, she grabbed the documents and backed out into the hallway, every step calculated. She needed to get to the car. Call someone. Anyone. But when she reached the front door and yanked it open, her stomach dropped. The tires on her car were slashed. All four. Clean cuts. Deliberate. And a note pinned under the windshield wiper. Truth doesn't set you free. Elena, it buries you. Back inside, she locked the door and pulled the heavy armoire in front of it. She needed to think. Strategize. There was a pattern, a reason her father had sent her here, not just to learn, but to warn. Back in the library, she spread the contents of the hidden box across the desk. One name stood out on a faded deed among the documents, Judith Langston Lexington, and a property address, not Willow Creek, another estate. One she'd never heard mentioned. Underneath the deed was a page torn from her father's journal. The writing was scrawled, frenzied. She knew everything. Judith tried to stop them. They silenced her, but not before she hid the ledger. If Elena finds the ledger, it's over. The fire crackled behind her. The ledger. Elena's eyes widened. This wasn't just about family history. It was about the foundation of Lexington Enterprises itself. Fraud. Secrets. Crimes are buried under luxury and success, and someone was still willing to kill to protect it. Elena stared at the photograph. In her trembling hands, the man with his eyes obscured, standing between her father and Robert Kessler. Unlike the faded edges and yellowed creases of the others, this photo seemed newer, intentional, preserved. Her mind raced. Who was he? And why hide his identity? The box of documents still sat open beside her, its contents now a minefield of questions. She spread them out on the cracked bedspread. Financial records with Richard Lexington's signature, handwritten letters in a woman's looping script, and that unfamiliar birth certificate. Judith Catherine Langston. But the child listed wasn't Richard. It was someone named Nathaniel James Langston. Not a son, a brother. She grabbed her phone again. Still no service. No bars, no Wi-Fi. But one more message had arrived, time-stamped only minutes ago. You found the wrong door, Elena. There are others you should leave locked. She turned sharply. The house was silent except for the soft hiss of wind against the old shutters. Clutching the documents, she headed downstairs. The library had become her war room. She dumped the findings on the desk and yanked open another journal. March 3rd, 1982. Nathaniel knows. I tried to buy him off, but the fool has a conscience. If he speaks, everything collapses. Our name, our empire, our lies. He was never meant to inherit. Judith should have let him die with the others. Elena recoiled. The others? She flipped frantically. Through more pages, April 29th, 1982. Judith tried to intervene. Claimed I was erasing the family tree to grow my own. I had to make a choice. Willow Creek saw more than blood that night. It saw justice. Mine. The words blurred on the page. Elena pressed her palm to her mouth. This wasn't about company politics. This was about a cover-up that went back generations. Her father hadn't been protecting her. He'd been isolating her. And now, someone else was watching to make sure the past stayed buried. A floorboard creaked above. Not the wind. She snapped. The journal shut and crept toward the staircase. Each step felt like it echoed down a tunnel. At the top, the hallway lay quiet. Then, movement. A door ajar that had been closed. The room at the far end. The nursery. Elena had never been inside. As she pushed the door open, the stale air hit her with force. The room was frozen in time, dusty toys, a crib, and faded wallpaper with dancing bears. But what chilled her was the music box on the windowsill. It was playing. She hadn't touched it. She approached it slowly and lifted the lid. Inside, the tiny ballerina twirled in slow circles. Beneath it, taped to the base, a small folded paper. You were never meant to see this, but if you have, then you are already in danger. The truth is deeper than legacy. It's blood, and it stains everything it touches. Look in the cellar, but be ready. What's down there never died. It waited. No name, just a symbol. 3 interlocking rings. The same symbol she'd seen etched on the spine of one of the journals. Something cracked downstairs. She ran. Back in the library, the fire had gone out. The window was open. The papers, gone. Just one remained on the desk, the photo. But now, the man's eyes were no longer blacked out. They were staring straight at her, and they looked like her own. Elena moved on instinct. She grabbed a flashlight, the photo, and the single journal with the symbol of the 3 rings. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob that led to the cellar stairs. She remembered it from childhood, a place Richard never let her explore. The wood steps groaned underfoot as she descended. The cellar stank of damp stone and iron. The beam of her flashlight cut through cobwebs, illuminating old wine racks, rusted tools, and something that looked like a trunk buried beneath a canvas tarp. She pulled it free. It wasn't a trunk, it was a coffin. Her breath caught. She reached for the latch. It wasn't locked. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a skeleton. Small, fragile. The jaw hung open in a frozen scream. Clutched in the bony hands was a photograph. Judith Langston holding 2 children. One was Richard, the other, Nathaniel. A sharp sound rang out upstairs, a door slamming shut. Footsteps, and then a voice. Still digging, Elena? It was Robert Kessler. The walls of Willow Creek whispered more urgently with each passing hour. Elena stood in the attic now, where dust-formed blankets and old trunks loomed like forgotten tombstones. She had followed another set of prints, lighter this time. Barefoot. Her flashlight flickered as she moved, passing an antique rocking chair that swayed without cause. The far corner, a painting hung crooked, an oil portrait of Richard Lexington's father, grim-faced and stern-eyed. Beneath the frame, Elena noticed discoloration on the wood. A draft. She pushed the portrait aside. A false panel. Hidden behind it. A safe. It was already ajar. Inside, a black velvet pouch and a sealed envelope. She opened the pouch first. A necklace. The Lexington crest was carved into obsidian, identical to the one Richard had worn in every photograph. Except on the back, this one was engraved, "To JKL, what they stole, you shall reclaim. Judith Catherine Langston." Elena opened the envelope next. To whoever finds this, if it's Elena, then the lies have finally run out of time. You are not my daughter by blood. You were adopted, hidden as a favor to my father after he destroyed Judith Langston's legacy. Your real mother died fighting for the land that built this empire. Willow Creek was hers. She died for it. I gave you a name, education, power, but not the truth. Morgan and Charles know nothing. Kessler does. If you read the final journal, in the cellar, you'll know what to do. And why must it end? RL, the light bulb in the attic, burst. Darkness swallowed the room. From downstairs, footsteps, deliberate, heavy. Elena froze. The floor groaned again. She didn't wait. She crept down the back stairwell, avoiding the creaking boards she had memorized the day before. In her coat pocket, the necklace and letter. In her other hand, her phone, flashlight disabled. The cellar door yawned open before her. Not locked. She descended into damp, earthen cold. The air smelled of soil and rust. A single bulb flickered overhead. The final journal lay on a wooden stool. Open. The first entry, this is my confession. Judith Langston was murdered for refusing to sell Willow Creek. My father ordered it. Kessler covered it. And I, a coward that I was, benefited from it. I adopted Elena to right a wrong, though I never dared tell her. But power, once stolen, poisons every hand that holds it. If Elena reads this, the house is hers. The land, the truth, let it burn if it must. But let the bloodline of theft end with her. Behind her, footsteps again. And then, a voice. You went too far, Elena. Robert Kessler emerged from the shadows, pale, calm, holding a gun. I warned you, he said. This house was meant to stay buried. Elena didn't flinch. You covered up a murder. He laughed softly. I built an empire. But you forgot the one rule of empire building, she said. Eventually, someone inherits the fire. She reached behind the stool and flipped the switch Richard had marked in the journal's margin. Click. A fuel line laid decades ago beneath the estate is now primed. Kessler's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I already did. She tossed the match from Richard's old cigar case. Flames leapt instantly, hungry, ancient, inevitable. Elena staggered through the woods, smoke curling through the trees, Willow Creek glowing behind her like a ghost set. Free. Sirens echoed distantly. Rain began to fall. Too late. She clutched the journal to her chest. By the time the authorities arrived, she had vanished. A new press release circulated from a foundation quietly registered in Vermont, the Langston Trust, dedicated to exposing corporate corruption, restoring stolen lands, and funding independent journalism. Its founder remained anonymous, but those who looked closely at the logo, an obsidian crest with intertwined initials JKL, might have guessed the truth. And in a quiet Manhattan cafe, a woman named Elena sipped black coffee, watching Lexington Enterprises stock tumble on the news of Robert Kessler's accidental death and a federal probe into decades of fraud. She smiled faintly, then turned the page of her newspaper. Some legacies are burned, others are rewritten.